We're good? It's 7:03 PM, and I am calling the December 19th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. I want to just announce that at the last night's Select Board meeting, there were problems with the Zoom audio. So if anyone wishes to appear and be heard in the matters that are on our agenda, I would encourage you to come because there may still be problems. With that said, our first order of business, as usual, is roll call. So when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton?
Present.
Jonathan Poor?
Jonathan Poor, present.
Emil Dahlquist?
Abel Dahlquist, present.
Rick Mitchell?
Present.
Matt Hamill? And Marnie Crouch, present. So I note for the record that Bill Wheaton and Beth Herr are not present. So the first item on our agenda is the Hamilton Wenham School District site plan review request and stormwater management permit application for the Hamilton Wenham School District's athletic campus redevelopment. And I have several observations that I think are important to make with respect to this project tonight.
Marnie, it probably should have the posting of the public hearing read
Oh, okay.
before this starts.
Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Do you mind? Okay, with apologies, go ahead.
The Hamilton Planning Board will undertake a review of a site plan application and a stormwater management application for a project proposed at 775 Bay Road by the Hamilton Wenham Regional High School. The applicant is Superintendent Eric Tracy and represented by consultant Kathleen Herval, Director of Athletics, Gale Associates Incorporated. The site plan review shall be as per the Hamilton zoning bylaw and state regulations in addition to the Hamilton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Article 29, as was recently amended and under review by the Massachusetts Attorney General. The subject property is located at the rear of 775 Bay Road and is also known as Assessor's Maps 40, lot number 11, and map number 41, lot number 1. The proposed plan is to add small structures and facilities related to an athletic facility and artificial turf fields, artificial turf tracks, tennis courts, lighting, grandstands, press box, amenities building, and ADA access improvements. Plans and reports are available electronically or can be viewed at the planning offices, Patton Homestead, 650 Asbury Street, Hamilton, Massachusetts. All wishing to speak on the matter should attend the hearing either in person or electronically via Zoom webinar.
Before I continue, Patrick, can we ascertain whether the Zoom audio is actually working? Do we see any issues, any hands raised?
I see one hand raised.
Assume the raised hand indicates it's working.
Yes, that would be a, a good inference. So I want to begin by observing that there was a miscommunication regarding the scheduling of this public hearing. I had advised Mr. Reffert that I preferred scheduling it after the new year. Really because of the other important items on our agenda this evening. So with that said, I apologize because I'm going to circumscribe this initial hearing of the matter. Also because of the holidays, I think a lot of people have travel plans and would like to have a short meeting rather than a long meeting. The other reason why I want to keep this agenda item short is that the town is in the process of engaging a peer reviewer. The peer reviewer may actually have been contacted. I don't know if an agreement has been signed, but because of the complexity of this project, I don't believe it's wise for the planning board members to go forward without having the benefit of a peer reviewer to give them advice with respect to all the matters that are not only in the documents and on the maps, but also what is said at the hearing. Also, I note from my own relatively limited review of the materials that have been provided, the geotechnical engineering report prepared by Novus Group is only in draft form, so that is something that needs to be finalized before the planning board is in a position to fully rule on any matters. It's also my understanding from looking at the materials that the synthetic turf has not been selected, and that decision will have significant ramifications. And the other observation that I have is that I believe the engagement of a toxicologist is warranted. And I say that because Gale Associates specifically stated in their materials, and I'm quoting, "We are not toxicologists," but they did provide the planning board with submissions from manufacturers, studies, and data regarding PFAS. So clearly, no member of the planning board is a toxicologist, but to the extent that we are called upon to evaluate PFAS chemicals, we need the advice of a toxicologist. A civil engineer can look at the stormwater management plans that have been provided, can evaluate the best management practices, and give us substantial guidance. But I believe that given the data and the media information surrounding PFAS, that it would be best for all parties if we had a professional assist us. So the purpose, I thought the limited purpose of tonight's meeting would be to hear from Gale Associates and have them just generally outline their concept of how to move forward. The sequence, this matter is not going to be resolved in one meeting or two meetings. So I want to hear how they propose to proceed in a logical sequence to deal not only with the site plan review, but also all the technical aspects of the projects. And before I hear from them, I just wanted to indicate that Patrick Reffer did present a short outline of how he thought that we could proceed. And I'll read that into the record, and that's for the benefit of Gale Associates. But again, we will, the planning board will determine how we proceed once we hear from our peer reviewer. But this is what Patrick suggested, is that Gale Associates would first provide an introduction, and then the planning board could raise questions and make comments, and I'm sure the public would be wish to make comments as well. And following that introduction, we would begin the technical presentations, and these presentations would include, but may not be limited to, traffic, access, emergency accessibility, snow management, lighting, the public address systems, site design, landscape design, and signage. And then we would continue with even more technical information surrounding topics such as grading, drainage, construction management, stormwater management, and the synthetic turf. With that information provided, I would invite a representative of Gale Associates, Ms. Kathleen Herval, to address the planning board.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I make a motion?
Oh, yes, please.
I move that the board consider deciding on the toxicologist peer reviewer to be hired by the town to evaluate this project.
Do I have a second?
Second?
So when I call your name, would you please indicate whether you assent to that motion? Pat Norton?
Pat Norton, no.
Jonathan Poor?
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton?
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist?
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth Her, aye.
Rick Mitchell,
No.
Marnie Crouch, aye. So the motion carries.
My only reason for voting no is because PFAS, although used very generically, is not anything that's been super well defined. And even those chemicals used in fields have not been evaluated to the point of which any toxicologist will provide any value and a feedback in evaluation of the chemicals used in those products. PFAS is something very popular to talk about and is used very, again, generically as a term, but it's not even defined on exactly what that represents or which chemicals are included as part of that
Well,
definition, or, you know.
I accept what you're saying, but I think that expert advice, to the extent that you're right, the toxicologist can say that, and that will allay the concerns of the general public.
For value, sure. I mean, there's,
Well, it's a.
recognize that there's a rate of limiting return on.
Well, the EPA is working on certain matters, and I don't want to get into any of that. But Ms. Hervel, if you would like to address the planning board at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. In regards to your approach in regard to moving forward with the project, we kind of concur with you. We actually were hoping tonight and we're prepared to do an introduction of the project to get things going. I had a PowerPoint, whatever, but well, I guess we'll do that next time. But I think what would be important for us to, once we have that introduction, is to kind of quantify, what are your real concerns. A couple things regarding, obviously, traffic, lighting. We'll be prepared to address all those, but maybe a few more specifics and narrowing those in a little bit better might help us to address, and provide, responsive answers to that. Regarding stormwater and such, I know earlier you had noted possibly delaying the stormwater review and the site plan review. We were hoping that we can at least have those reviewed simultaneously, because the stormwater versus site lighting really don't impact each other. They are, pretty separate, the layouts, things along those lines, the physical access signage, is not impacted by stormwater.
Right,
So
right.
we'd appreciate if you'd consider that, just, one, to keep our efforts, that we come up here, and your time too, that we try to do as much as we can. I would like to just mention a few things on the turf selection, just so you know. This project will be bid publicly. Gale Associates has put together a very specific spec for the synthetic turfs that we propose. And because it is a public bid, we're not permitted to say, use this specific turf. We can't. We can say something similar or equal, but what we try to do is we specify a field that will last, meets the quality standards, the playability standards that we specify, the safety standards as far as, concussions, things along those lines, that we put all of those things into our detailed specs. And the only other thing I would like to add on the PFAS end, we know PFAS is an issue. We've dealt with it in other towns, and what we've provided in the submittal package, just so you understand what's in front of you, is testing that's been done on various different types of turfs on our past projects, specifically even last year, to try to put people's fears to rest regarding PFAS or the levels. So just so you know that we know the issue. We even put in our specs testing. In fact, our Conservation Commission permit does specify that we will test the synthetic turf and infill and such for PFAS to the whatever is the most appropriate testing at the time. And as you have said, the testing changes daily. EPA has been looking at it. As of right now, the Mass DEP only really has 11 of those substances that they are regulating. So just keep that in mind, and we'll take it from there. But that's the reason we provided it. We appreciate the concerns, and we did provide a lot of that information to the Conservation Commission as well. So
Has the Conservation Commission issued any decisions with respect to this project?
we have approvals for the project, yes, for both phases. Well, originally the project started, I could pull up a plan real quick, but the project originally started many years ago. I think it's 2017. We actually came before the planning board for the track and field project and the baseball multipurpose. And since that time, the school district determined that they'd like to also, if they're going to be doing the project, we added softball to that, and also tennis courts, because it's our understanding tennis is getting to be very, very popular in the town, with pickleball courts as well, because we know that's a growing thing as well. But so that's what we've come back for that whole entire project. They've advanced their thoughts on the amenities building, you know, to provide restrooms at the field, like a team room, concessions, things a little more formal than what's there at this time, so they can do a whole complex.
Right, well, thank you very much. And once we
Right.
hear from our peer reviewer, it may be possible that the two of you can get together and actually formalize a agenda. And I just also want to add that because the planning board has a lot of things on its plate, we have a master plan that we have to review and hopefully approve. We have stormwater management regulations to consider that go along with the revised stormwater management bylaw that was approved by the town at the fall town meeting. We have a lot on our plate, so we're not going to be able to allocate entire meetings to this particular project. So my thinking is that we break it up into 45-minute increments so that we can proceed along that track and the planning board can continue with all its other work.
Perfect. That's fine.
So, thank
Okay.
you.
Yep.
And I hope you didn't have to drive too far.
No, that's okay, thank you. This is Tom Gurry with the facilities for
Oh,
the
sure.
school district.
If I can.
Could you introduce yourself so
yes.
everyone can hear?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Tom Geary, I'm the Director of Operations for the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District. And I just wanted to follow up on the recent action that you just took requiring peer review for PFAS. And I would just respectfully ask that you define what that peer review includes, associate it with either a bylaw, state regulation, only because we know that the funding that was approved by the voters last year will ultimately be paying for this. So we want to make sure that it's not just an open-ended peer review, is that it's defined and that we know what the parameters of that peer review
Let's
is.
put it this way. You introduced well, not you, Gale Associates introduced PFAS as part of its appendix and attached materials to it, and I think the peer reviewer would have an obligation to look at that material and assess its persuasiveness, and then, if required, present other information one way or another. So that would, to me, be the scope at a minimum.
Yeah, but Marnie, we can't have peer reviewers evaluating every element of every specification as defined
Well,
for the
they're going to
course
be
of the project, right?
There are going to be specifications with respect to the PFAS and the peer
But
review.
there'll be specifications related to everything else on the project as well. I mean, we have a peer reviewer as it relates to the stormwater bylaw and everything else, and the civil engineering and everything else that would went into the calculations, but that's the governance from which we weren't going to get in the specification review of the structural elements of the shed supporting the storage of.
Are you making a motion for the planning board to reconsider its vote?
I would make. I guess I would just. I'm providing caution towards the extent in which we apply resources towards evaluating all the elements of the specification. I would definitely entertain a motion to revisit our decision to engage in a toxicologist to review the PFAS specifications that have been provided as part of the package. At this point in time, yes.
Do I have a
absolutely.
second?
Before we move on to a second, I want to support where both parties are going. We can only adhere to state, federal, existing health standards. We can't delve into the potential science because we're not experts. Neither do we have the authority to do that. We're a land use board. We are not a public health board. So I want to make sure this doesn't become a political fishing expedition and we get into endless discussions that we can't resolve because the science hasn't resolved it, and we stick to specific standards that have been set based on objective, independent analysis in the science that currently exists.
Well, in response to that, I would say the stormwater management bylaw, its first purpose is protect water resources. And secondly, the issue of PFAS has been put before the planning board in these very documents. So, as I said, at a minimum, a toxicologist would review the materials that have been provided to us and comment on them, whether they are probative of our decision-making or whether they should be supplemented by other information. So that's the point. If you, have you reviewed the materials that have been presented?
Definitely not to the extent which you have,
Yes.
apparently.
So,
but,
so
I-
there
but I
are
do
two
understand.
reports that have been prepared by manufacturers. There's a report on soils from Vermont and some other information. So I think our toxicologist could evaluate what is before us and suggest any other additional information that is pertinent to this. And this is going to give if you're right, it will give the public confidence in any decision that we make. That's how I look at it. So with that said, do I have any comments from members of the public?
I think there's a motion on the table and waiting for a
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry. Did you second it or clarify it, or how does that work? What did you do?
I'm clarifying it, and I want to make sure that we stick within the four corners of the authority of the planning board and not engage in a public discussion of the potential.
I think I responded to that.
Yeah.
So do you have, are you seconding the motion?
No.
Sorry.
I got
Any
talked
other
into it
second?
anyways.
All right, so thank you for appearing, and we'll see you in.
I have one
Oh,
clarifying
sure.
comment before we leave is, I really am walking away with a little ambiguity of what the scope of the peer review is. The stormwater management peer review is pretty cut and dry because it's tied to your bylaws and state law. I'm just still not sure what we're going to expect for the peer review for a toxicologist.
Well, we'll
I
first,
just wanted to make
we'll
that-
first have to engage one, and as I said, the application itself puts PFAS on the table, okay? So I'm not making it up.
I think he's asking about what other criteria are going to be evaluated by a peer reviewer.
Well, we'll start with what's before us. That's what I said. And if the peer reviewer finds these materials sufficient, he can say so, he or she can say so. And if he or she finds that there are other issues with respect to this, or how stormwater management will deal with these types of chemicals, then we can consider expanding it. But we'll start with what we have in front of us.
I think what he's asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not locked in on the PFAS. He's asking what the peer reviewer is going to be looking at in addition to the chemicals.
Well, we have a civil engineering firm that's been engaged.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to have you describe to him some of the
Maybe-
key
maybe I can answer
some of the
that.
key
Yeah.
elements that a peer reviewer will look at, just so that he knows and the public knows what a peer reviewer actually does.
Yeah, I think what has to happen is that the town has to draft some information for a peer reviewer to review and respond. And I think at that point, because we have not put one together yet, but
Right.
that has to get done before anybody's hired.
Right, but there are typical things they're going to look at. They're going to look at the layout, the civil engineering, the drainage, the lighting, the traffic.
A toxicologist doesn't get involved.
I'm outside of the toxicologist. Remember
Okay.
I said I'm not talking
Yeah.
about
Oh, right, yeah.
toxicology. I'm talking about
Yeah,
a
other
standard
specs that,
peer review
Yeah.
outside of toxicology.
If,
I guess there-
I'm clear on what the peer review process is, having gone through many developments, but as it pertains to the toxicologist,
Okay.
I'm just walking away with an undefined scope. And first, I worry about the cost of the project. And secondly, I wonder if a public body's making that decision in public. I haven't heard any information on what types of PFAS are going to be studied, and it just seems open-ended, and
Okay,
I worry
well,
about the scope.
as I said before, though, we need assistance in determining all of that, but the application put the issue on the table. It's right in front of me. And so I have studies and data and information from manufacturers and all these studies. Are they probative that PFAS is safe, yes or no? We start with that.
Right, and I think that's fine to study that, but I think he and the public and the board should understand, when it comes down to the final vote, is we're going to have to adhere to existing standards and science, not speculation and emotion.
Of course.
So-
The slippery
that-
slope you go down is hiring so our jurisdiction, so the state of Massachusetts has requirements, CMRs, for all these things. MADEP has requirements for all these
Right,
things.
yeah.
It's that governance that the project is required. We don't have to hire consultants to confirm that the project meets the requirements of MADEP or the CMRs. That's the state's jurisdiction. That's the project's requirements under the state guidelines. We don't have to hire a consultant to confirm that they're doing that.
Well,
There are state requirements for these
I
things.
understand why you're saying that, Pat, but I think for the purposes of the board and the public's assurance, just having somebody review that independently, objectively, and say they've met all the criteria that exist at the state and federal level, and so we have the confidence going forward that all the information that we need
Exactly,
is
exactly.
there,
Exactly.
and we have a solid foundation for making a decision.
And
That's the-
if everything always adhered to state and federal regulations, would never have any pollution problems. So, I mean, there's all,
Yeah, consultants wouldn't solve that problem.
so anyhow, is there any?
One more piece I'd just like to
Okay,
add is that this wouldn't be before us if we didn't have a role to play. We're just playing the role of what the planning board needs to do is review the material. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you.
Not just checking off the state's boxes. So we have to check our box. So that's all.
Any public comment? Okay.
My name is Ann Giroux. For the record, I live at 821 Bay Road. I'm a direct abutter to the high school. I've spent a lot of time reviewing that application, and it is pretty dense. And I guess I'd like to point out that I think it's insufficient in a number of respects. There's really nothing in there at all about lighting, except for one plan at the very end of the plan set that is supposedly a summary plan. There's nothing that shows where the lighting goes. There's nothing that talks about the lighting fixtures, how the lighting systems will be operated, et cetera. There's nothing in there at all, no mention of noise, the audio systems, et cetera, simply not a word. And the thing that I found actually a bit more troubling is that they've left out of the application either commitments that the school district has already made or that have been imposed on them by other boards. For example, Superintendent Tracy stood up at town meeting and said, there will be no crumb rubber infill. In this submission that we got, there's a whole section on how crumb rubber infill is not very bad and that it's an okay infill to use. Are they suggesting that that's something that we might end up with even after Superintendent Tracy told us? I mean, I think they ought to, in this application, make it clear what's off limits with respect to this project. Superintendent Tracy also said that they'd be willing to agree to a curfew on lights. There's nothing about that. Also, with respect to the Conservation Commission, my property abuts the softball field, so I've paid a lot of attention. I went to all the Conservation Commission hearings. I read the order of condition that resulted. It was a very long order of condition. That order of conditions says that the infill at the softball field must be an organic infill. There's nothing about that in this submission. It also says that the, quote, resource areas, which are a defined term, capital R, capital A, must be shielded from any light pollution. Well, under the local zoning bylaws, the local Conservation Commission bylaws, the resource area is the wetland plus the 100-foot buffer zone. The 100-foot buffer zone goes into the middle of the softball field. Basically, what that means in my mind is that half of the softball field cannot even have stadium lighting. Again, no mention of that. There's just a plan in the drawings that shows stadium lighting around all sides of the softball field. I'm not going to go any further because I have a lot of comments about the PFAS submission. That's not appropriate here.
Right.
I just wanted to point out that I think there's a lot missing from the application. It ought to be added. What's in the Conservation Commission order and what's already been committed to and spoken in public by the school district should be in your submission.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think at our next meeting, when we have the introduction, we can delve further into a lot of these issues. But I'm sure that Ms. Hovell has heard your comments, and I think that to the extent that representations were made at town meeting, that should be a significant consideration. Okay, anybody else? Again, I don't want to delve into the substance so much. There's going to be an opportunity to really do that at a later point, but if you have just a few minor points to make, I would appreciate it.
I am a student at the Hamilton Wenham High School, and I've come to give a voice to the students who do not want the turf.
Could you provide your name and
Right.
address, please, for the record?
Angeline McCrease. My address is 15 Donburn Way.
Thank you.
So I've been taught in biology class that it's very important to consider the human impact on the environment. And we've been told by the Ipswich River Watershed Association that there's been a concern with the turf leaching plastics into the Ipswich River. And I also know that the Miles River and the Ipswich River are very, ecosystems with a lot of plant life. And I believe that if the plastics were to get into these ecosystems, it would contaminate them and be impossible to remove. So I'm not sure if this is worth it.
Right, again, thank you for that. I appreciate your comments. We're going to have a lot of opportunity to delve into these issues. So don't feel that I'm trying to curb your statements tonight, but I appreciate your sentiment. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. Anybody on Zoom? I can't see that.
Peter has her hand up. Hold on a second. Peter's been allowed to talk.
There he is.
Good evening. Peter Gordo, 416 Bridge Street. Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes.
can't.
Great, thank you. Just a suggestion with regard to the peer review scope. I think I understand, both sides are trying to figure out how to draft that in a way that is clean. And I guess Patrick is going to have to prepare a written scope of work for any peer reviewer. And I would suggest that perhaps you would share that scope of work with Tom and with the school so that they could look at it and make sure that both parties are on the same page. Might be a way to allay some of those concerns.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Hi, my name is Purnima Macris, and I live at 15 Donburn.
Yes.
I'd like to draw your attention to a publication that has come out recently about the plastic turf as widespread pollution of aquatic environments. I'm going to leave this publication to you, with you, but I just want to read what the studies found. Basically, it says that artificial turf can constitute over 15% of the mesoplastics and macroplastic contents in rivers and oceans. Artificial turf fiber may contribute significantly to plastic pollution. They measured up to 20,000 fibers a day flowed down the river in this particular study, and up to 213,000 fibers per square kilometer floating on the surface of nearshore areas. So artificial turf is a major pollution. Our town, sort of banned plastic bags in 2015 because of the concern that we have. I have a lot of other publications too. They found the reason why we banned it is that eventually the ocean is a sink for plastics. What we throw out ends up in the ocean, and it has ended up in the stomach of whales, sperm whales, toothed whales, all kinds of different marine organisms, and that's why we voted to ban plastic bags in this town. And it seems like an irony to me that when we ban plastic bags, we are letting the turf industry pollute the ocean with macroplastics and, plastic fibers. So I don't understand that. I hope you can clarify that. And that should be a part of your study. Environmental pollution, you should take that into account when you make your decision.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. So I think now we can move on to our next agenda item. And that is a discussion regarding the Browns Hill Overlay District. The planning board is in receipt of correspondence from Dr. Ken Barnes, and I wanted to begin our discussion with just a couple of observations.
You want to wait until...
I am. I'm going to wait. Okay, so as I started to say, I wanted to just begin our discussion with a couple of observations. And those really are, what are Gordon Conwell's Theological Seminary's rights with respect to its property? Because at our last meeting, there were references to the seminary not wishing to give up any of its existing rights. So it appeared to me to be warranted to consider what exactly those rights are. And following discussion with John Witten, I can report to you that your rights, the seminary's rights, are the underlying R1B zoning, subject to the Groundwater Overlay Protection District, and also any and all rights you have under the Dover Amendment. And that's it. I mean, absent a zoning change, that's it. without a zoning change, you cannot sell your buildings and have those buildings used by any other party who's not a religious or an educational institution or a childcare institution. A zoning change is required for that. So the other observation I wanted to make is that on February 7th of 2023, the planning board voted unanimously to remove the underlying zoning from the overlay district that it drafted. Now, in your memo, you indicate that at all times you wish to adhere to the underlying zoning. Well, the drafts that we had on the table eliminated it, and at least in my mind, I was taken aback when on December 5th, you indicated that that was a requirement of yours. So as it stands now, I have to say that the Browns Hill Overlay District, as it's presently constructed, if we examine that in light of the red line version that was produced for us for our December 5th meeting, although it was promised in July, it gutted the Browns Hill Overlay District. It essentially meant that the planning board's work really would not yield fruit. And any, I think it's apparent to the members of the planning board that with the retention of the underlying zoning and the changes that were contemplated, that there was little likelihood of meeting of the minds. So with that said, I have to say that the memo still fails to really grapple with what the planning board is trying to do. So you have a statement that the bylaw should make clear that the buildings, roads, and other infrastructure are compliant with the new BHOD. So, for example, if the seminary were to stay on the property for 20 years, there's absolutely no way that at the end of that time, any of those systems would be compliant with anything. They would all have to be fixed at one point or another. So the parking lots are impervious surfaces. They may or may not contribute to stormwater runoff. If the property is sold, the infrastructure may or may not be adequate to cope with the increased density. There are also myriad issues, and I put that on the table. I ask any other planning board members to make whatever comments they would like, but I think at this juncture, this whole project is in jeopardy, and even if it can be resuscitated, the deadline of an April town meeting is very problematic in view of the planning board's workload. And I made that observation probably a couple of meetings ago, that we needed to get something definitive with respect to what we're doing, and we're not there. So any discussion by board members?
I guess I'd just like to clarify, I think, a fact, which is under item 2B. It says, we've conducted all our involvement with the understanding that the current underlying zoning, i.e. residential use, would remain across the property. If that means the underlying zone, I would just clarify that one of the first actions that this board took before even undertaking any of the analysis of the overlay district bylaw was we voted that in order to do that, even to start the process, the first step was to remove the underlying zoning. That it can't live simultaneously. That was the first exercise, and it was a vote. I think that's just a clarification of fact.
Yeah, it was February 7th. We voted unanimously. And we did that because we realized for two things. One, that a subdivision on that property, for example, was the least financially beneficial to either the town or the seminary, and also it was the least environmentally sustainable.
So I would recommend at this point, given the fact that the seminary is unable to and has demonstrated a lack of seriousness in negotiating a concrete agreement, that we take no action on this unless and until they engage in a serious and focused and disciplined negotiation between our attorney, Jonathan Witten, and a competent real estate attorney on the side of the seminary. And also echo the fact that trying to get this sold at the April town meeting would be a Herculean undertaking at best. And given the lack of cooperation, clarity in this really almost 2-year undertaking, it doesn't bode well for that actually happening. And it's really generated a lot of ill will by the public and by this individual board member, and I think probably other board members as well. So I'm not feeling any compunction to invest a lot of time and energy in this unless there's some substantial change in the attitude and the performance of the seminary.
I would like to see this process go back to where it was at day one when we asked the question, is there a development proposal? And I personally would see no problem with dividing the property into a lower section whose ultimate objective was some form of cluster multifamily apartment development, and then the remaining middle and upper part of the hill, which the seminary can stay on. And if they wanted to, us to examine this as 2 phases, let's say, we would come up with an overlay district for the first phase and an overlay district for the second phase, but in both cases, only upon a development proposal. Bring us 1 or more developers. They want to reuse the apartment buildings and have them tell us what they'd like to do, and we have then something very concrete that we can work with. We're not opposed to those uses, and then we can go before the town with a bylaw for the lower half, which involves some alterations, additions, whatever we and the developer can agree upon, and there's no ambiguity in that. The problem with trying to plan in advance is ambiguity. We have this possibility, this possibility, this possibility, this possibility, 5 other possibilities with different configurations, and it's very hard for, the townspeople to vote for a proposal that has all of those options and ambiguities. So let's stick with, one thing at a time. It makes sense to try and reuse the lower buildings as some form of multifamily development. Bring us a proposal for 1 or more developers to do that, and then we'll negotiate some combination of a development agreement and overlay district for that part of the hill. And, 20 years from now, if you wish to leave the top of the hill, there'll be a different world, and with different, possible uses and so on, and we can think about them at that point. I guess that means in the meantime, the underlying zoning of the top of the hill remains 1 acre single family, but for the lower part of the hill, it would be whatever we agree on with the developer. That would be my view. I don't want the board to spend any more effort until we have a developer in front of us with or more than one with proposals.
I tend to agree with Bill. I was just thinking of it in terms of what if this was the defined scope for the first day of the effort, all the feelings and frustrations aside, how would we approach the project? And I think it would be much in the same way. In taking a look at a real project and evaluating at its face, obviously, over the course of the last year, we've done nothing but give indication that we're willing, and more than willing, obviously, to rezone the place for beneficial use of the town and of the property with the neighbors in consideration. So any developer should at least be be able to lean on that and understand that the opportunity is there. So wait till the project is presented and proceed then.
I would not support a piecemeal approach to this that ignores the top of the hill as anything goes on the top of the hill. Anything that's divided off and has a zoning change needs to at least acknowledge how the rest of the site behaves. So to do that in a vacuum, I think is, it will leave value on the table, unseized for the seminary. It'll also leave value on the table for the town and missed opportunities. I'm not saying you can't do this in phases, but you have to look at it as a whole.
And I would agree, because there's immensely higher value as a cohesive whole than
Absolutely.
than there is
Absolutely.
as a piecemeal approach.
So I would not support ignoring the top of the hill and just parceling off a piece. So unequivocally.
Yeah, it's such a rare piece of property because of its size, location, and many other reasons, some of the buildings on it, that it would be I agree, that would have been a loss in value to subdivide it into several sections. The other thing I want to keep in mind is that when we began this process with a little bit of a proactive approach on that, with alternatives to submit whatever you like on that, we were pretty clear from the beginning. It ultimately lies, whether this bylaw gets approved, it ultimately lies with the people in town, with the residents. And we were kind of walking a tight line, trying to figure out from the residents how much is too much, what would really fit in terms, in their view, what would really be a huge improvement for Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and what would really work for the town of Hamilton going forward. And so we offered this illustrative plan model that we worked out, and the response we kept hearing was, we're really close. We're really, we're not that far apart. Was the only comments we really heard that were instructive. And so this was a surprise. The redlining in the end was a huge surprise. It is what it is. But I think, I just think it's a huge opportunity. And I just, the other thing, Bill, my disagreement with what you were saying is the other thing we were trying to do is get a certain amount of certainty. I think the people who live in the area want to know beforehand, not wait for a developer to come in and say, this is what we want to do. What do you think, town? And then we go back and forth through a trial and error method. Well, that's okay, but this isn't okay. Is that going to be a special permit or not? And so forth. This was a way really to solve a lot of problems and get something we all could understand will happen there with a certain amount of certainty. That was again, the goal throughout this whole process. And we kept, and ultimately we picked something that I think is more than allows you to double the size of your square footage on your lot, but do it in a way I think that really has minimal impact on a residential community there. It uses the right models, I believe, to continue with a particular character in that area. So I thought it was a good, and still keeping the option open. You could do whatever you want. You could, under a special permit, file whatever a concept plan you'd like to do. So I think I would agree with what Rick was saying. I think going completely on pause until we see action on the part of our partner here in a positive way. And there are so many loose ends out there now, in terms of how things actually would work if you start to break it into little pieces, separate out the apartments, whatever. It's really a complicated scenario, and it's just the beginning of a very slippery slope, I think, in terms of losing that entire piece of property. So that's, Bill, did you?
It is certainly true that the whole is worth more than the sum of the parts. That's an oxymoron in planning that's true. And if, in fact, the whole hill was up for development, then I would say a plan in its entirety is absolutely the only way to go. And the problem I see is that that's not the world we're living in now. The seminary has said that they want the upper two-thirds of the hill to remain as part of the Dover Amendment, their truncated campus for future activities. And we could sit here and spend a lot of time coming up with illustrative plans for the top of the hill when the current occupant of the top of the hill has no interest in leaving. And I see that as a, perhaps an interesting academic exercise, but if they're not going to leave for 10 or 15 years, the world may change, and the plan that we put together for the top of the hill in, 2050 is just irrelevant when 2050 comes around. And I mean, so yes, the whole is worth more than the sum of the parts, but we don't have the whole.
Well,
As if we are to believe what they say.
They also have the privilege of the Dover Amendment, so they can sit there, we can write a code for the entire site.
Let me just make a point here. We're
So
set,
that will take a lot of time and effort, and
it's essentially
I'm without necessarily bearing any fruit.
It's essentially done. But to your point, we have repeatedly said that we did not want to see piecemeal development of the site. And this site is integrated already. I mean, it isn't as if you can just say, here are the apartments. How do you get there? You get there by access off of Essex Street. And that
Feared curb
leads
cuts.
into the main part of what the property that the seminary wishes to retain. So you have all the wastewater treatment center, the roadways, the access.
Those are all issues that the developer will have to solve. And I mean,
But
if the
the other
multifamily developer comes with a proposal that involves the relaying the streets, like you two gentlemen suggested, that could be great.
The
I'm
other
just
thing
saying,
is if the
why
seminary stays
we don't
there-
own the whole. It's
Bill, can I just, one point here is, I think you're missing the forest for the trees here. We have tried to work with the seminary in good faith for more than 2 years. We've asked for proposals, for if they had a developer, they had nothing. So we took the initiative to develop a plan. We, as was pointed out, we were assured repeatedly, we're so close, we're so close, we're so close. And every time we thought we were getting close, the goal line moved, or was changed, or the game got changed in a course of 6 months. I don't care what it is that they're proposing. I don't see the value in investing any more time in anything unless and until we have a definitive either plan from them or they accept the plan that they said was so close and negotiate in good faith with concrete terms and conditions to a development agreement that is acceptable politically. One other point, Bill. The town is not going to, the population is not going to pass this zoning bylaw without some surety of what's going to happen in the future. They've seen what the seminary has done in the last 2 years. It was leaving, it was not leaving. It was staying, but it was staying on part. It didn't know what part. Then it came back and said, we're staying on all the parts. We've offered them by right on the use of their existing properties. So an overlay district still gives them the right to carve off the 210 units. And in fact, that's what they want to do. That's what's going to give them the lifeline to survive and stay on there. The rest has the opportunity to be developed based on the illustrative plan that we've developed. The
Or a
voters
special
aren't going to
permit,
just
that's really
say-
important. Or a special permit, that's
Yeah,
so
it's a
important.
hybrid.
or a special permit. The voters aren't going to just say, oh, sure, let's carve off and give them, the 210 units, windfall of $25 to $30 million, and we don't know what's going to happen to the rest. They have no confidence in the seminary's staying power here. You can't sell this project and just say, well, we'll carve off this and then hope for the best. and then it's not going to sell. I wouldn't sell it. I would get up at town meeting and say, this is not going to work. I would stand up and say, as a planning board member, I would vote against this.
So I think we're talking about different things, but maybe the same next step, which is, I don't think you're proposing we move forward with the
No.
overlay district as it's currently written to protect surety and the rest of the site and
I'm
everything else.
saying-
But I think Bill's also saying not to write an overlay district for just the bottom of the hill to allow development of the dormitories. I think we're both saying, let's do nothing for now, but wait until there's a development plan or proposal in front of us to assess how to rezone, whether or not to rezone, what to protect, what not to protect.
No, I think there's two options. We do nothing and wait until we get a definitive engagement, or they accept what we proposed, they engage in a serious development agreement negotiation, and move forward. It's as simple as that.
I don't think I'd support moving forward with the overlay district with the way it's currently written. I think it's a wasted effort to continue to move forward with the overlay district the way it's currently written to further there's no project right now. It's not something you got. We're at the end of the year. April's a few months away.
I think you're missing
It's hard to look back to
I understand.
beginning of, I don't know when you would have to have a bylaw approved internally to have it ready for vote, but it doesn't sound like something we should move forward and put effort. I think we have a real project in front of us that we're saying we're only going to spend 45 minutes. That's a real project that town resources are spending money to engage in. And I think I found it kind of interesting that we're continuing down a road for no project, while there is a project in front of us that we're saying we're pretty busy. We're only going to spend a couple of minutes a meeting on.
Well, I think the point is the ball is in their court. They determine their future.
Yeah. Maybe now's a good time to let the seminary talk.
So I'm just saying they can take a process that is 90% complete and say they like it. That's their decision. They can make that decision. They're the landowner. They can say, yes, I like it. I want to do this. That's fine. I'm just saying we shouldn't invest any more time unless and until they say, we think this is a great plan. We want to adopt it. We support it. We give up the underlying zoning. We're ready to engage in a serious effort to make this work. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's up to them to determine what they want. I'm just saying, I feel we're done until they engage in some serious discussions and agreements, period.
So what would you do if they walk in tomorrow with two developers and, want to sit down and have a proposal to interconnect some of the apartment units and make a...
Bill, they already have developers who want to buy the 210 units. Under the plan, the overlay plan that we proposed, they have the by right ability to do that.
Yeah, but that plan also has all sorts of other aspects with regard to the rest of the hill.
Yeah, but it's not tying them to any of that unless and until the property is sold. What we're doing is buying the future. We're ensuring the future of that property and what it looks like, and we're giving the property owner a windfall in value at the time they want to sell. Now, sure, at the time they want to sell, if it's 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, they could come back with a developer and say, we've got a developer that wants to look at this as a whole. We think we need to rewrite the bylaw. Great. We rewrite the bylaw. We say, okay, we're going to do something completely different.
Wait a minute. How can they come up 10 or 15 years from now with a developer that wants to develop the whole hill? That's going to deny them what they need on the lower part of the hill in order to continue.
No, it's not, Bill. I don't know how to explain this any better. They have the by right use under the bylaw for all their existing buildings. They can do what they want with those buildings under the overlay district. That's what they intend to do with the 210 units. That's the carrot that's there. They need that to survive. If they don't get it, they don't survive.
Well, I understand.
That was my preliminary comment. I mean, right now, as it stands, the seminary has the privileges attendant to the Dover Amendment, and they're significant. They're subject to Section 10.7 of our Hamilton zoning bylaw, and they have the underlying zoning. That's all they've got. If they want to do anything with those properties, they need some type of zoning relief. I'm not going to say what it is, but it has to be there, because under our existing bylaws, those are the rights that they have.
And that
They cannot sell to a third party, and those third parties cannot walk in and take advantage of those buildings.
And to
That's not in compliance with the underlying zoning.
And to maintain the value of the entire property, any sort of even piecemeal overlay district needs to take into account the whole property as an understanding, so that you don't accidentally have leftover pieces that are undevelopable or, compromise neighbors' interests. You can't do it piecemeal.
But without the overlay district, don't we still have that influence? Because it's a project being proposed without a bylaw to present. We have the ability at that point to put in all the assurances and protections of the in the overlay district, the way it's written. I guess I don't see us giving away. There's no giving away of authority by waiting till we have a development plan in front of us, because all the things you mentioned that are protected in the overlay district as it's currently written are still available to protect at that point in time, because it's a special permit process and it's a zoning
You
change.
actually
It's a
just
new overlay
argued
district.
yourself into support of the overlay district.
Exactly.
Because, as Marnie said, without an overlay district, all they have is R1B,
Or when
one
being
acre
subject to the
1 acre
GPOD.
zoning, period.
So what's wrong with making an overlay district for the lower half and an overlay district for the upper half, which is ostensibly looks fairly similar to what we've had drawn up, and we just do it one at a time?
That's fine. If that's what they want to do, then come back with something. What I'm saying, Bill, and to the rest of the board is, we're done. I'm done. I don't want to do any more work. I want to have.
I would support that we
Okay,
wouldn't
good.
do
And
that.
I'm going to, maybe I'll use my gavel.
That's too gentle. You have to really.
I think the consensus of the board is a hard pause for whatever reason anybody's articulating. I don't think that there's anyone on the board right now who's going to pick up a pen or a pencil to do more work on the overlay district as it stands now, because there's no meeting of the minds. And so everything that the planning board did really started with the relinquishment of the underlying zoning. And if that is a condition of this of the seminary's position, then that's there's no point in going forward. And there are other issues as well. So I think, in my opinion, the only way to move forward is in a sense, as Rick said, and we need not just bullet points, but really final, hard decision-making in writing, and see where the things pan out.
I make a motion that we table all further efforts on the BHOD for the time being.
Second.
I don't know. Do we want to hear
Discussion?
the applicant
Yes,
is
I-
here, and we haven't taken a comment. If
I
anyone
think
has.
we need to
Well,
have
that's
some
what happens when you
comment,
make a motion. You then open it up for comments.
Right, and that you beat me to the punch. So
Sorry.
we had a second, and so now we have comment. So I don't know if anyone from the seminary would like to be heard.
Marwin Walters for the seminary. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we're disappointed to hear this. not what we expected. Dr. Barnes will speak a little bit after I will, but let me go through a few things, because I think that based on what the comments I've heard today for some of the members, it seems like we are speaking past each other, and that there may be more room for agreement, and we may not be as far apart as has been suggested tonight. Let me at least explain it from the seminary's perspective, because some of the comments tonight really have been personal in the sense of accusing us of bad faith, essentially. And I don't think that's fair, and I think it's appropriate for the public anyway to hear what our perspective is on the history of this. I've said this many times, and it's what happened. In this case, the seminary was approached by the town, not vice versa. The seminary was approached by the town and inquired whether the seminary would consider allowing an overlay district to be placed on its property. We were identified by the Master Planning Committee for the town as one of the few spots, and it's been described as an excellent parcel, few spots in town that there could be commercial development in order to enhance the tax base for the seminary. The board of the seminary considered that request and then said, yes, we would be willing for the town to have an overlay district. An overlay district, which by its very name means that the underlying zoning stays the same. Otherwise, it's just a district. So if it's continued to be called an overlay district throughout the entire period, and yet it's not, in the mind of the planning board, a truly overlay district. We said we would be willing to do that. I then appeared in front of the planning board in April or May of a couple years ago, was it? And the first thing that was pushed back on the seminary was, well, where's the plan? Where's your proposal? And I said at that meeting, we don't have a proposal. We were asked by the plan to come, by the town to come and participate in overlay district. In fact, I submitted an outline of an amendment to the existing business overlay district that's out on Tobacco Road as a way of starting the conversation. So we entered the conversation understanding of an overlay district. We continued our time throughout that time understanding it would be. The February 7th meeting, if you go back to the minutes, I think you'll see in the recording that the planning board took no input from the seminary or the public before it voted to eliminate the underlying zoning. So you point to that as a date that you say that's been the establishment that it would be no overlay district. You took no comment from the seminary, and you took no comment from the public as to whether the public agreed with that. I wrote a letter on June 5th. The seminary submitted a letter on June 5th.
Mr. Walters, may I interrupt you? I don't think at this point a history is going to be that helpful. I mean, we are where we are. However we got there,
Madam Chair, if I may, that is not what the planning board has accused the seminary of tonight. You've accused us of coming in here in November and changing the game. That's what's been said. Changing the rules of the game, changing the game. What I'm saying is, in June of this year, we provided a detailed letter, which is public record, where one of the first things on the first page was that we disagreed with the taking away of the overlay district.
Okay,
So to accuse us of coming in and saying that we changed the game in November, that's just simply not fair.
Okay, well, so,
I have a question.
well, let me just finish, though.
Yep.
Because the one thing that I've always said, and I confirmed this with John Whitten, there is nothing that precludes the seminary from obtaining citizen participation to advance whatever type of zoning change you would like for that property. You, as the property owner, can bring a bylaw before the town at town meeting for a vote. I mean, the planning board has been working to do something that it believes is the most beneficial for the town and also the most fiscally beneficial for you. But if you disagree with that, you have that ability to write your own bylaw. And John Whitten says you need 10 individuals from the town to move it, I guess, in front of town meeting. We can clarify those details. But that is within your purview. So if you're not happy with what the planning board has done, and it would seem that the underlying zoning is a real issue for the planning board and one for you as well, that you have that, should say, right to propose what you think is appropriate for your for the seminary and also for the town, and see if the town supports your position.
Well, I'll just finish with this, and then if I may, invite Dr. Barnes to speak for the seminary on this. We've been committed to this process. We do not agree that we have not been serious about it. We've spent a lot of money. We've had outside consultants. We've spent a tremendous amount of time. We've redlined your version of the bylaw as requested, and we don't think we are that far apart. And let me just finish the point that I say that we're talking back each other. Our primary concern in the email that we sent to the planning board this week is that the seminary not be in a position of losing its ability to use the property as it has. And so the things like that the roads are fine, that if we're forced to upgrade the roads the moment the bylaw's passed, that's a very difficult thing for us. If we lose abilities under the Dover Amendment because of taking away from that's a problem for us. If we've got a deed property over, that's a problem. If those aren't issues, and if that's not what the planning board is seeking, then we don't have as much disagreement as you think, because we can live with a lot of the other things. So let me just turn it over to Dr. Barnes.
Can I ask a question? When you said the town has come to you, what body in the town came to you? Was it the manager, was it our town manager, was it select board, master planning? Because, that seems another place where we keep, I feel like you might have gotten a message from one group.
The master planning committee came to us.
No, actually, it didn't, Merwin. It was the Gordon Theological Seminary Task Force, of which I was a member, and I actually was the author of that idea, and it was brought to the then president and suggested, would you be open to discussing that as a way to increase the value of the property for you? You keep getting hung up on the town came to you. You are in financial straits. You need to develop that property in order to survive. That's the bottom line. And I don't know why we're having this conversation over and over again. If you want to have a concrete discussion, we're ready for it. But we keep going around and around in circles. Well, you said this, you said that. You said in July you would have a red line version to us. It came to us in November. I mean, good God. When are you going to get down to business and say, we need to get this done, we're ready to engage in a serious negotiation? I mean, the red line came back and said, we went site plan review with we want approval not requested with no site plan review. That's legally impossible. An amateur would know that. We said that a dozen times during the meeting, yet you keep coming back with that. You're not listening. You haven't been listening the whole time. We're ready to engage. We have engaged with you. We've spent $60,000 of our own money. We've spent literally hundreds of hours trying to get to an agreement, and we keep getting vagaries. We're getting close. We want to make it happen. Well, the proof is in the pudding. We haven't seen anything other than vague statements, and I'm done. I'm just done. You've got to come back with something substantive, or we're not going anywhere.
May Dr. Barnes address the board as well, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Ken Barnes for the seminary. So in July, I approached the board with exactly what Bill said tonight. Exactly what Bill said tonight. Let's do this in 2 phases. Let's go for the low-lying fruit and not get bogged down with a lot of the other things. And we were told no. And that's fine. That's fair. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, after the president spoke and said, we're staying, that's not moving the goalposts. That's absolutely consistent with what I've said every time I've stood at this podium, that we were going to sell some or all of the property, and that the market would drive what we did or didn't sell. The market has spoken. We're going to stay. So now the question becomes, how do we make sure what we've all wanted from the beginning, we have a win-win result. So that the town gets tax revenue, you get a surety for the future. Rick, you've made that clear. You think that's a reasonable request, and so do we. And so I had breakfast with a member of the planning board the other day, and I said, look, I know that the red line version looks like someone bled all over it. I get it. But, you know, those aren't our final offers. They aren't even objections. We agree with the BHOD. 90%, as you said, Rick. We agree with 90% of it. We think the areas where we put in the red line, that those are still things worth discussing, having a conversation about, or else we wouldn't have bothered to redline them. That doesn't mean that we're going to throw our rattle out of the pram if we don't get them. We've always said we don't view this as a negotiation, it's a conversation. We respect all the work you did. We think I would rather have the BHOD, as you drew it up, go before the town with all of us unified than not. All my email this week said is, however, there are just a couple of things we need clarified, and I think you've clarified them tonight, but we think they should be explicit in the BHOD. The one, as I said, is the question of private property. It continues to be private property, and we respect the fact and accept the fact that there are certain areas that you don't want developed and you want certain sight lines. We get it. But let's be clear that even after that happens, it's still private property, and access, because this is the key issue for us, access has to remain at the discretion of whoever owns the property, because it's not public property. And there are a lot of things that we can't predict, security issues, et cetera. We've seen what's happened recently with school shootings and the whole thing. So I don't think that's an unreasonable request. We just would like that clarified in the BHOD. The other thing is, as I said, you've already said, Madam Chair, that as long as we're there, we still have our Dover Amendment rights. Great, let's just keep that in the wording. Just let's put it in there so there's no ambiguity. That as long as the seminary continues to operate on whatever portion of the property they continue to own, they continue to have their Dover Amendment rights. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And it in no way violates either the spirit or the letter of what you're trying to do in the BHOD.
Actually, that would be part of the development agreement.
However we accomplish it. However we accomplish it. We just want to make sure that it's there in writing so that we have our surety as well. In terms of the underlying zoning, I said to my friend at breakfast the other day, I said, it's more of a pink line than a red line. It really is. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. If we lose the underlying zoning in favor of the BHOD, I'm not going to lose sleep over that, folks. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. We've said all along, it's been our understanding that it was an overlay, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Okay? So, and the last thing about the grandfathering of existing structures is, I think, also very normal and very reasonable. If we have a situation where nothing is being added, we're not adding a single bedroom, we're not adding, anything, then the roads that currently serve that property well should be allowed to serve it as well. So, again, that's it. You take those things away, and we are there. So you say the ball's in my court. I'm saying, here you go. Here's the ball back. This is where we are. Let's get this thing over the line, because the abutters are going to be very happy that the seminary's not moving and nothing's going to change. Town's going to be happy because they're going to get tax revenue. We're going to be happy because doing this allows us to stay and do what we do, which is education. We're not real estate developers. So we're there as far as I'm concerned. Those couple of clarifications is all we need, and we're there. We go through it line by line and say, okay, are we going to talk about this, or are we just going to concede it? Let's just not waste time. Some of them we might say, yes.
Can I just ask you a question, please? When you say that the bylaw would make clear that building, roads, and other infrastructure are compliant, I think perhaps the workaround is that the Dover Amendment would apply to those existing roads and whatnot that you're using now. But if in 15 years you were to sell, none of that would be compliant with the BHOD.
I think that's probably a good answer. I'm not the lawyer. And by the way, we have secured Nutter, McClellan, and Fish. They're helping us with this. Myron is a fantastic attorney for the seminary. He's not a specialist in this. He's the one who brought Nutter to the table for us. So that kind of language, that's the 10% that we're talking about. Let's figure out how we word that so that you're happy and we're happy. It's that simple. Same thing, yes, go ahead. No.
We have other items on our agenda that are now really in jeopardy.
Madam Chair, I think we need to see if the public needs to.
Right, I'm not done. But now, because you interrupted me, I lost my train of thought. I think we need to, we'll hear from the public, but we'll need to consult our attorney, and we're going to have to get maybe the attorneys involved and figure out the exact next steps, how to get this done.
Again, that is music to my ears and music to yours as well.
At this juncture, I don't think anybody is going to keep working until such time we have the parameters of a final agreement with respect to these elements here. If that can happen, all for the good, and we'll see how things unfold from there.
Can I make a suggestion,
Yes.
Marnie? I think that's a great course of action. I would suggest that the board no longer be involved in this and that they engage with John Witten and their attorney and take the existing bylaw as it is, as what the planning board wants, and negotiate the points of that. And then based on what the attorneys come back, the board can review it and decide, does it meet the intent? And then the attorneys can then negotiate a development agreement.
And I would agree with you in large part, but there are certain metrics that have not been completed in that.
Well, I'm
And-
thinking that they can start that process with what's there, and then we can finish it. Correct me if I'm wrong, we're 90% or more there. There's still some things we've got to fill in, but the key elements of by right, special permit uses are there. If they say, we accept that, okay, then it's a signal that, okay, we're willing to work on that. But not until we get, an incremental agreement of what we've worked on, what we proposed, do they agree, find out what they agree with and what they won't agree with. And if we're substantially there, then say, okay, we'll take up next step and finish it.
Right. Well, unfortunately, there might be a little delay because of the holidays.
No, I get it. I'm just sort of talking strategy.
So, yeah, we do have to, I think the attorneys have to start talking and nail this down. I mean, it's too difficult to finalize some of these things in this kind of public forum because
I
they
agree.
really, it's legalese at some point. And many of these things are part of the development agreement, I think.
I agree, but can I just say, in all due respect to attorneys, I want to be in that room, and I would hope someone from the planning board is in that room as well. Just so that we don't get into a situation where we assumed we knew what the other side was thinking.
Right, I get it.
So if we could just have the attorneys and someone from the planning board and myself in that room, we'll get it done, because that's what everybody wants.
Any other comment?
Just one other comment. In addition to that, just as a good faith, this goes with my thinking that we want to see something positive before we're going to recommit. And that would be information from you, whether it's a list, however you want to do it, an outline of what you intend to do, beginning with the development agreement right through. Are you going to hire a surveyor to survey the site so it becomes legal, get a legal document? There's a whole list of things. How you intend to deal with wastewater treatment,
GPOD.
GPOD, how does that get resolved? So we would like to see from you steps that you intend to take and what your rough schedule might be when you can get that accomplished. And that would be then, from my standpoint, a good faith commitment to go forward. But otherwise, I would agree with Rick that the attorneys should be there, should be part of this at this stage.
Can't dicker around with the
No.
language anymore. It needs to be a negotiation with attorneys that shows concrete progress.
Right. And actually, the overlay district in itself was pretty much done. It was just the metrics and the tables that we had done. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, we need to do some cross-checking on the numerics of it, but, yeah.
Can we hear from the public?
Yes,
Any
Thank you,
comments?
Madam Chair.
you're welcome.
Dave Dashkin, 215 Woodbury Street. The only value of the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary property is the private wastewater treatment facility. Without that facility, they cannot have the existing apartments, and certainly with their proposed expansion thereof, they can't do anything more on the property than what they already have. So that is the key element. Now, I propose that they should consider connecting into the South Essex Sewer District, like other developments in our sister town, Wenham, have done, and remove the wastewater treatment facility from the property. I'm the immediate butter of that, as I've said on several occasions at this meeting. So my other concern for the town is, if they retain their Dover Amendment on the remaining property, what prevents them from saying, you know what, we need apartment and dorm space, let's build some more? Is that the purpose of the Dover Amendment, so that a developer can work with a religious or educational body and say, hey, look, buy this property, get the Dover Amendment, put in a wastewater treatment facility, build what you want, we'll subdivide it, and we'll keep on building like that. So that's for consideration. What prevents them from just building another set of apartments?
The overlay district.
Anybody online? Yeah.
Anybody, any other comments?
No one with their hand up.
I'm Nancy Dashkin. I also live at 215 Woodbury Street. And more than 2 years ago, I sat at a zoning board meeting when a developer asked for zoning changes so that the existing dorms, call them apartments, would become housing. And at that time, the discussion, which included many abutters, had to do with the numbers of people and cars and need for infrastructure improvements that would be required. As that discussion went on, it became not a zoning change, but an issue for the planning board. And here we are. Those underlying issues that Emil alluded to, that Dave Dashkin alluded to, the studies that need to be done for infrastructure, for groundwater, for water treatment, for sewer treatment, have got to be done before any kind of development. Whether it's a development plan that we've never seen, whether it's good faith involvement with people from the seminary, whether it's a group of volunteers who are abutters, who are from the planning board and whatever, would come together to work out a sequential analysis that would give value to this property, and it would make possible for the public to have a better understanding and feel confident that we weren't being railroaded. Because sometimes that's how it's really felt from lots of different perspectives. So I encourage you all to think about those sorts of analyses. And yes, maybe the seminary has to pay for them.
You're welcome. Well, I really, I hope the public doesn't feel railroaded, but from my perspective, it's a slow train because Bill, we've been working on this for quite a while. So, any further comments?
So we have the motion on the table. Any further discussion on the motion?
Oh, the motion to pause.
Can we move the motion?
Yes, it was seconded, and at this juncture, I think we have to take a vote. So the pause, though, is in terms of what the planning board does in terms of continuing to work, draft, do the metrics on this Brownsville overlay district. And so maybe we could clarify until such time as the attorneys report back to us on the status of the development agreement and any other matters pertinent to our picking up our pencils and finalizing this. Would that be accurate?
I would agree with that as a motion.
Okay, so how
We need to
about,
re-second that, or is that?
No, I think you just clarified the original motion.
Okay.
right. So we'll take a roll call vote. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth, her, aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. I will attempt to get a hold of John Witten. I know with the holidays, everybody's really busy, and I know I have travel plans, but hopefully we can get this ball rolling again, and the ultimate product will be something that the planning board, the select board, the seminary, and I hope most importantly, the abutters can get behind. So, next item on the agenda is a discussion of rezoning the business district and the reuse of the Winthrop School site.
Can I initiate a comment on that discussion, having sat last night with Rick through the presentation given by the architects and listening to the discussion from the select board?
Yeah, do you want to give us a status of what happened that?
Well,
I think
I was just
Pat was
gonna
Pat can certainly give.
infer that the architects haven't progressed much further than they had in the August presentation that they gave, even to the point.
Back up.
Yep.
This is with respect to the schools, right?
Well, it's also in relation to a master planning effort and our effort towards the rezoning of the downtown, which is kind of mostly the reason we're going down this road.
It's the schools.
Start with the subject of the schools. because
Yes,
they're
you
the-
have to.
They're the initiator of all that follows.
Let me start over. Thank you. Related to the subject of the schools, there's a bunch of options being considered, and none of which are even being considered at the moment because they're not baked far enough along to prioritize one project over the other or one element of scope over the other. And they're not even being discussed at this point until further So in April, Rick was pretty good at getting the dates in front of the board to make sure we were clear on what the steps were. But it's not until the point in April that we would even have a budget or requirement to move forward with one option for the project over another. That gets presented to the Building School Council, State of Massachusetts program, and that takes them a period of months. It was not until November that there's actually a project being considered for April 2025 vote in the town. So just keep in mind that whatever we're discussing here there's not going to be any surety in whatever the project is until that point in time. April 2025, town vote for whether or not.
Schools.
For the schools.
For the funding.
For the schools. And I don't feel it worth effort towards rezoning or prioritize zoning over one side or the other, taking advantage of land that's not available. There's too many things related to the downtown that's up in the air. I agree, it's never too early to start planning. There's never, but to engage in consultants, to spend all of our time and effort on this project of master planning with this other major process in front of the town, and of course, cost associated with, there must have been 10 consultants on on the call last night. I mean, I just
Well,
think it's
We'd
irresponsible.
have clarity in April of 2024, depending on what the school committee chooses. I think, is it the school committee that chooses? or
But
the
the
building?
state wouldn't have approved the project at that point.
Can I-
They would just be
can I-
presenting a
can I
project.
Add just some
Right.
Yes,
clarity to finer points of this. They're going through a very prescribed process. The MSBA, Mass School Building Authority, has a very definitive process of how the evaluation, design, procurement process goes, and it's typically a 2 to 3 year process. So the consultants looked at 14 sites in Hamilton and 14 sites in Wenham. And most of, if not all of those sites were eliminated because either they did not have the required acreage, or they were compromised because of wetlands, or a combination of both. The wetlands precluded development because there just was not enough space. The two remaining sites are Winthrop and Cutler. That's what this process is now looking at. There are several different iterations of design on each of those properties in terms of size and configuration that they're trying to figure out best serves the needs both internally of education and externally of recreation.
Could I just ask one question? Is this new schools, not retrofitting either school?
Correct.
Well, combination of both.
It could involve a retrofit of part of a school to connect with a new facility. So they're evaluating, does it make economic and operational sense to demolish all of or part of and reconnect with a new building, or demolish entirely and build a new building. They're going through the iterative process of trying to determine what maximizes the value and is at the least cost. So there are several things, but it's between these two pieces of property. The financial analysis is still in the preliminary stages, but they've done the budget estimates for each of their scenarios, and there's probably half a dozen for each site. The budget analysis currently favors the Winthrop site, the Cutler site, in terms of cost to develop the property. So that's where it is. On April 10th, according to them, they will make the collective engineering, architectural, construction conglomerate will come to a conclusion, will present it to the school committee, and then make a recommendation to MSBA for their evaluation to determine if it meets their criteria for future funding. They won't make that decision until November. They will then say, yes, we approve your recommendation, whatever it is, for the site and the configuration. It will come back to the town meeting in April 2025 for a vote to appropriate whatever that cost is. We will know at that time what we believe the MSBA contribution will be to the 100 million plus school. If the town approves it, then the MSBA will in fact commit those monies, but not unless and until that happens. So that's the sequence that happens. So, would you agree that that was basically
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes, that was more or less accurate. And also the note in which, and I'm not sure that it's been confirmed whether or not a lease agreement for the duration of that 50-year period checks the box for the state as far as having control over property. One of the funding requirements for
Right.
a project of this kind is that you have control over the property, and we all know how leases are written. They have termination clauses in them, so I was actually curious
Which
about how
gives
that.
the select board incredible power to determine actually where that project goes, because they could just say, we're not renewing the lease, and you are going to a specific site.
When does the lease expire?
Excuse me?
When does the lease for Winthrop expire?
2 years.
They both
2 years.
expire at the same period.
And they did that purposely to keep a short leash on it, so, because they want to renegotiate the entire regional agreement with the schools. So that's the timeline. So the reason that we're even having this discussion is because once that decision is made in April, then it's open season on whatever site is left. I believe, and I know the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and other boards are very strongly in favor of recapturing the Winthrop site. The school committee, I've talked to the chair, she understands that. She's a Hamilton resident. So I'm proposing that that we, and I'm speaking from the Hamilton Development Corporation piece, be proactive, because I believe that site is going to be abandoned and will be up for development. I could be wrong, but I don't want to take the chance that on April 10th that it suddenly becomes available and the town has no idea what it wants to do with it, and developers come in and say, well, we'd love to make a proposal, we'll buy the property for, I don't know, $1 million, $2 million, and we're putting houses on it. I think that would be a terrible waste of opportunity, economically and design of the town, for its downtown. So the HDC is and I can't speak for the board because we have not made a decision, but there is this sentiment among a number of members that, and we've been trying to convince the select board that it needs to appropriate the funds now to, or at least sequester some funds to make that happen. Because as Emil has described, this is at least a 12 and maybe 18-month process. Once that decision in April is made to, and I believe it will be made on Winthrop, all hell's gonna break loose in terms of everybody's gonna have ideas of what they want to happen there. So it's gonna cause a lot of confusion. I think if we can preempt that discussion by saying we're actually working on a plan, and this plan may actually help finance the 20-year bond that the town's going to have to float by actually encouraging the development of that site. Because the FinCom has said, when we build a $100 million plus school, it's gonna add $1,000 to everybody's tax bill. Well, we ought to be thinking, can we offset that somehow by developing a vacant property? Yes, we're speculating. We're gambling that that's going to happen. But I can't, in good conscience as a public official, sit by and wait for that decision and have no plan in place to effectively deal with that property. So the HDC is considering and will evaluate its ability and desire to actually potentially front the costs if the select board can't or won't make a decision on positively funding it until April. Because at that point, it's too late. It means you would be issuing an RFP, and you probably wouldn't start the process until September because it's an intensive public process. Well, if you're starting in September in 2024, and a vote's coming in April 2025, you really have effectively 6 months to actually put together a plan and accept a plan. So that's sort of the current thinking, and the desire would be, and because it would incorporate the downtown business district, it would justify the HDC's initial investment with the hope that the select board would compensate the HDC when and if they decided to move forward with a study to take advantage of that piece of property. So that encompasses where I'm at.
And you don't agree with the last part, because the state requires us to go through an objective process of selecting a site, and I think we need to go through that process and at least delay what we're talking about doing in the rezoning, jumping on a property that's not yet made available because the process isn't complete. You say that there's a cost analysis out there, but it wasn't presented, it's not really made public yet. I don't know if you have access to it, but it's not, they're not even talking.
Analysis is public, Pat.
It is?
It's on the website.
Okay.
You just
well-
read it.
Well, they weren't even ready to
I've
discuss.
asked for it too, and I haven't been given
It's
access
there.
to it.
It's
Okay.
there.
I haven't seen it, but they weren't even to a point last night in which they were even willing to talk about site selection.
Oh, I know.
So for us to start talking about rezoning, I think is a bit premature, and at least wait until the April 2024 decision. Let's wait until the decision for the site has been selected by the project team before going through the rezoning effort or the master planning effort. Because at that point, you're still a year away from a town vote. April 2024, they will have selected a site, whatever it is, they would have gone through the objective process. And that is the appropriate time to start this effort.
I understand your logic, but it ignores political reality. I understand you haven't had experience in actually writing zoning and actually passing it at town meeting and actually developing a project in this town. I have. I know what it takes, and I know what the politics are. So I'm laying this out so you understand what my thinking is and where the HDC is, what the HDC is considering.
I think 2 points need to be raised. One is that it is not just for the Winthrop School site, it's for the entire downtown.
Right.
And that's really important, and that's the reason the HDC is considering it. And the fact is that even if the Winthrop School site is not made available now, it's not to say it won't be available in 25 years or longer, depending on demographics here in town. I think that getting the ball rolling is the way to go, and the benefits to the remainder of the town, even excluding that particular site, are immense.
And all-
Can I have a
and all-
couple
just-
comments?
just-
Okay, go ahead.
Just also, we have the MBTA housing
Right.
issue. That's not going away. So that's kind of wrapped up into everything as well.
A
So-
couple things. One is, there's a reason why the select board didn't pass it, because I think one of the select board members actually.
Didn't pass what?
Didn't pass the funding, because they felt like if they one of the select board made, the argument that there's people in town who think the decision's already been made.
No, that was a legitimate.
Can I finish? Okay, so that's what I've been understood is, one of the select board people said, it seems like if we pass the funding for this, it will look like we have agreed with them and with the people who are saying that a site has been chosen. And so I think that was one of the reasons why they chose not to fund this.
Oh, absolutely.
The other thing is, I mean, I would probably agree with Pat, because if it's supposed to be an independent decision in April, I think that makes sense. What I would say at a minimum is I think we should wait until January, after the 2 public hearings have been conducted by, there's 2 public hearings on different Wednesdays. One's a Wednesday morning and one's a Wednesday night.
10th to the 17th.
Yes. I think that is gonna give us a little bit more understanding, because I do know that there is a group of, there's at least 250 residents who are currently, have signed a petition, wanting to advance small schools in the town. So I think.
Wanting to advance what?
Small schools in the town, to keep small schools in the town. They feel.
2 as opposed to 1.
Yeah, but
As opposed to a mega school, because there's a lot of different varieties of things, but, and the other thing is, yesterday, just a practical aspect is the traffic. I can't imagine traffic for a 600 or 700 kid school on Asbury Street. I mean, the traffic yesterday, there was 1 lane that people could get down. So I just think that there's a lot that still needs to be discussed before we determine. So I think at least at a minimum, I would suggest we table this until January. after
Might
this year.
I suggest, in the interest of neutrality on this, that if we are going to consider the alternative uses for the Winthrop site, we should also have the consultant consider the alternative uses for the Cutler site. Cutler site is only, what?
It's not part of downtown.
No.
Right, it's
Downtown.
not part of the
But I think you're overplaying the value that this housing will have in terms of meeting the MBTA requirements. I think it doesn't matter if somebody wants to Cutler School and says, if you would do a modest rezoning on that, we'd pay you $2 million for that, the same amount you'd pay for Winthrop. Then that alters the sort of calculus about how you think about one proposal or another. I wouldn't preclude, I understand where you're coming from in terms of the MBTA issue, but I think that's a little bit jumping the boat. Maybe we should find out what both sites are worth, so that if you develop Winthrop, then you get the money from Cutler, and if you develop Cutler, then you get the money from Winthrop. We need to know what the money is in either case.
Well, there are other options, and that it would be that Winthrop would go through the same process in maybe 5 years, like Manchester has done. So,
Except that would not be a 5-year process. It would be, as they admitted, 10 to 15 years.
well, we do have an example in Manchester where I think it was like a 6-year process.
Yeah, well,
So anyways, I just think that, again, we don't know enough, and we're trying to figure out, like, what's the best for the kids, what's the best financially, what's, there's a lot of moving pieces here.
And I thought we met the MBTA requirements, but not the recommendations.
We met the law,
So why don't we
We can
just have a
make-
statement from a lawyer, say we meet the law, but not the recommendations, and we're not gonna
or
do
we
anything.
could argue that we met the law.
Right, I remember that.
no, that's going to be a loose.
Anyhow, this discussion has to be continued.
Well, actually, Holden has just won their case against, and
They
Littleton.
didn't win, Holden didn't win the case. The plaintiffs in that case didn't have standing to
Right.
seek the relief that they got.
Right, and then, I know Littleton and.
So
I
they
think-
haven't won anything. It's
Okay.
really, the issue has never been teed up. So
Got
the
it.
people who sued the town of Holden did not have
But there was a housing-
legal
okay.
standing to seek the relief that they requested.
Could I back-
It's as simple as that.
Could I back out a little bit?
Yes,
Okay, bigger picture.
9 o'clock.
Yes,
That's the-
I'm focused on that. So,
Turn into a pumpkin.
yes, so an idea is we have talked a couple times about doing a little bit of a workshop that basically looks at the downtown kind of critically, and Patrick started this when I first started on the board. We started a process and we sort of picked that thread up. And I think there's an opportunity to have a discussion, a little bit of a, like, stand up and walk around a map and look at it. Look at the downtown a little more expansively and creatively, not focus on the Winthrop School. You could even leave the Winthrop School out of the discussion, and you could have a full discussion around what are the challenges and opportunities downtown? What are we seeing? And you could have the Winthrop School as a side discussion to that. You could have the MBTA as a side discussion to that. But really the main focus is, how does the downtown hang together? What are its development potentials? What's broken? What's not broken? What can we do with this? And it all ties together. And I would promote that if we had a half an hour or 45-minute dedicated creative discussion around this, it could put the Winthrop School into better perspective. It could put the MBTA process into better perspective. And if we chose to, as the outcome of that, if we thought, hey, it's valuable to draft an RFP to get this thing ready to go so that we can either trigger the RFP or wait till April to trigger the RFP, but we're ahead because we've made a little bit of analysis. And to answer Pat's question of a previous meeting and Bill's question of a previous meeting, Pat's question, I think, was, if we're putting out an RFP, why are we doing it? What are the goals? It'd be lovely to have a workshop to answer that question in a fair and open and sort of open dialogue with the board. And Bill had a great question of, wait a second, the town is already chopped in half by the train tracks and by two separate zones of downtown. it's broken, it's permanently broken, there's nothing more to be done about it, just live with it. So that's a fair question also. Is there any potentially, are there any opportunities? Standing and looking at a map, we could look at that, and we could answer both those questions, and then that could inform, do we want to proceed with an RFP? What does the RFP say? What's the content of the RFP?
I agree with you 100%. And we'll have to be looking at our agendas very carefully.
I'm not saying right now.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying, instead of hyper-focusing on the Winthrop School,
Right.
let's look bigger.
Right, and the downtown is, it needs help. So I agree with that wholeheartedly, and we'll try and figure out, how to put all the pieces of our agenda puzzle together, because we have stormwater management regs to consider. Do we have any kind of timeline when they may be done?
Well, I'm looking at the meeting schedule for 2024 now. So we could probably commit to a date if we agree on this being the schedule.
Pardon me?
We could probably commit to a date to have a draft before the board if we all agree this is the schedule.
Yes, so that is something to consider. And Patrick, these dates don't conflict with any
School vacation.
school vacation, any holidays, any federal holidays, so
June.
looks good. So,
if this is the, if this is the next, are we on this agenda?
Yeah,
Are we on
the-
the rules and regs, or are we off the master plan?
well, we could stop everything and look at the agenda.
Yeah.
I don't know, do we have to vote on this agenda, or can we just adopt it?
You mean the calendar?
The calendar, yeah.
You could just adopt it.
Yeah, we could just adopt it. So, assuming this is good, and I think it is, because it doesn't conflict with anything except maybe one of my vacations.
We
Be
may
that as
consider
it-
one meeting in December or November. The town of Ipswich held me hostage because they only met once in November and once in December.
Well, let's cross that bridge when we come to
I
it,
can make
because,
another motion in November for the canceled December meeting.
right, I'm thinking we're gonna need more meetings than the ones listed here,
Oh, boy.
given all the things we have on our plate.
I quit.
I think that's the idea, Pat.
So, maybe if we get all the work done in the first half of the year, we can take the remainder of the year off, okay?
Well, so November 26th is that Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Did we do that this year?
Let's
Was it
not,
Tuesday?
can we just worry
Okay,
about
that's fine. I'm
the
just-
short term before we worry about the
Well,
long term?
I was just thinking that's a little close, but.
Yeah. Let's focus on the short term. So, Pat, pick a date. You can tell us on January 9th when you're gonna have those regs done. And I'm not trying to,
I just didn't want to do it without, Alex and I had exchanged an email, I think I copied you, but we collectively didn't commit, even though I could commit to have a draft. I want to make sure Alex is okay to have it
right.
reviewed before it gets to the board.
So why don't you report on January 9th?
do that.
Because those have to be, there has to be a public notice on them.
Yeah, I'll give an update on January 9th,
Okay.
rules and regs.
Okay, so we've approved the meeting dates. The regs we're going to find out when we consider them on January 9th. And then we have a set of minutes to approve. I was able to obtain the Word document for these minutes, so I think the version that you have contains my edits. So unless you see some egregious typographical error, they are probably in pretty good shape.
This is your edited set.
Good.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of
The minutes of June
June
27th.
27, 2023.
Do I have a second? Okay, when I call your name, please indicate that whether you approve these minutes. Pat Norton,
Aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Weeden, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So the next item is, you don't have this information, but Beth has kindly looked into the past and identified meeting dates where we do not have minutes, as well as minutes that we have approved but have not been posted, minutes that have been approved subject to edits that have not been posted, and one,
It was a little puzzle.
yeah, it was a real puzzle.
I mean, I was, yeah.
So I am going to ask her to continue this profoundly necessary work, and
That was only on the ones related to the Chabaco Hill ones, because those are obviously a bigger priority.
right,
And
most of
then I'll
them,
go through and with the rest of them.
most of them were done.
Yeah.
They just haven't been
There was just
posted.
one that wasn't.
So what I'm going to ask her to do after that, once we get all the minutes that have been approved, subject to editing, and if they need to be edited, that's fine. If we get a Word document, they can be edited. But after that, any minutes that we need back in the time machine, say, I'm going to charge Beth with just going through and assigning minutes to board members so we can get our minutes in much better shape. Because we are right now, I would have to say, in violation of state law. So Patrick assures me that going forward, we're going to have more minutes, but we have to do something with our minutes. It's a problem. And I know it's a problem because I went to try and find what happened when we voted on the underlying zoning district. And it took me a while to find it because we don't have minutes. So that's, if you and Patrick work to get the minutes that have been approved posted,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't really do anything. I mean, that's
well,
just wherever they
if you,
are.
wherever they are, if
The
they.
ones
ne-
that have been approved, that's clear which ones have been approved, and they just need to be
Yeah, so
posted.
now you have the
So-
dates.
Yeah.
And then, once we've got that all sorted out, then you go through here and just go through the,
Yeah, those would be the other ones that weren't part of Chabaco.
right.
Yep.
Just
That's
assign
fine,
them,
yep.
you know, go through everybody's name and try and be fair and give everybody the same amount of minutes. And we'll get them done. And they don't have to be, you know, the minutes for Chabaco were important because the potential for
Right.
litigation, but
Right.
these minutes say for today, discussion was held on this and that. I mean, whatever we vote on has to be in the minutes. Our discussions don't have to be
Detailed,
verbatim or
okay, got it.
detailed.
Okay.
Okay, so any other board business, anything anybody else wants to bring to our attention? We better do a motion to adjourn before Rick falls asleep.
Oh, I'm relaxed.
I make the motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
Happy holiday.